Welcome to Driven to Lead. I'm your host, Wayne Brandon. In this series, we explore the real world stories of key executives to find the leadership lessons that help move us all forward. If you like these conversations, we'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe and like button. It'll help us out a lot. But now we got another great program for you today, so let's make it happen. Well, very excited today to have with us Chad Altbaier. Chad is an accomplished CEO in consumer products arena. He's expert in domestic manufacturing, global sourcing, commercial growth, brand licensing, organizational transformation. He came up through the financing and accounting side of the business. He's also been a chief commercial officer for many companies over the years. He's currently the co-CEO of Standard Fiber, which is a large global textile manufacturer serving in many, many channels of retail, hospitality, direct-to-consumer, and manufacturing customers. A great executive with tons of experience and just an awfully nice guy, too. Chad, welcome to the show.
That's great to be here, Wayne. Thank you for that introduction.
Yeah, well, I like to have people on the show who've been around the block a few times, and you're still a young man, but you've been around the block, and you can share a few things with us that we might learn from, and we can have a little fun with it as we go along as well. Why not? First of all, why don't you tell us about Standard Fiber? What kind of business is it? How does it work? Not everybody's familiar with a textile manufacturing business.
Absolutely. So, company was founded back in the late 90s from a Chinese American, started the company out here in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is where I'm based. It was sold to a family office, sort of a small private equity outfit in 2006. They've held us ever since. So it's a 20-year hold on this
Wow.
investment, long time. And it's been a great producer for the in the portfolio for the investors, hence the reason for continuing to want to hold on to it. We started essentially as a sourcing company from China. And back in the 90s, there wasn't a lot of that going on. We were supplying manufacturers and wholesalers here in the US that were then selling to
Mhm.
retailers. So we were kind of a supplier to a supplier, component supplier,
Right,
OEM materials.
right.
So if you think about a pillow or a mattress pad or a product that you would buy at a Walmart or a Costco or a Macy's, we didn't make the finished product. We made the components that went into the finished product, the outer
Mhm.
fabric, the filling material, et cetera.
Sure.
We have since evolved to a much more sophisticated company, which we can talk about in more detail. And now we do full-scale finished bedding products. So essentially, Standard Fiber, as you said, we're a bedding products manufacturer. You can think of us as sort of a comfort company. We make everything
Right.
that goes on top of your mattress that's not the mattress. And we still continue to have an OEM business where we supply the mattress ticking to the mattress manufacturer. So that remains part of our
Mhm.
business. We've since sort of bifurcated our business from the wholesale OEM side to more the direct retail hospitality D2C business that you mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
So we're still a component supplier. We're also a finished bedding supplier, pillows, sheets, blankets, comforters, mattress pads, what we refer to as basic bedding. We're not really a decorative bedding provider.
Okay.
And we also manufacture pet beds, which was a business we got into about 5 or 6 years
Yeah.
ago. Great time since everyone had their
Cool.
COVID puppy. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's
Yeah.
that's what we
Great.
do,
Got to make those dogs and cats comfortable.
no
So
doubt.
so it was during this 20-year period, am I hearing you right, that during that period you made this transition and separated the business into component manufacturing and then some direct retail sales or sales at least on a B2B basis to other retailers?
Yeah, like most things, probably half strategic, half luck. There was some
Okay.
baby steps, and frankly, and this was before my time. I've been with the organization coming on 5 years, but about 15
Mhm.
years ago, we started finding some of our manufacturing customers establishing their own sourcing offices in Asia and finding less value, candidly, in what we brought to the table. And so the writing was on the wall that our customers were sort of starting to go around us, right? And so
Right.
for cost savings, whatever. And so we decided, well, if they're going to go around us, then maybe we need to go more direct to their customers, right? And so a tricky thing to navigate. You have to thread that needle very carefully, as you can
Yeah.
imagine. And so there were some instances where we started supplying to retailers directly. A quick funny story, we actually started doing business with Walmart, who's our largest current retail customer, almost by accident. We were supplying a manufacturer who was supplying them, who sadly went through a reorganization. And through
Mhm.
the bankruptcy courts, they actually said, well, Standard Fiber, you're supplying these guys. These guys in the middle can't supply Walmart anymore. Why don't Walmart just buy directly from you? So it was actually a court
Wow.
orchestrated relationship where we then became a direct vendor of record to Walmart. And
Yeah.
that started about 6 or 7 years ago. Ever since, it's grown dramatically, but it was almost unintentional on how we
Yeah, that's
started
fortuitous,
that.
right? Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, it must be
Indeed.
you just chalk it up to good, clean living. I love it. So
Yeah.
the business has evolved significantly. Now, you also mentioned something else that was surprising. You've had the same private equity investor for 20 years. I mean, typically
Yeah.
the PE investment horizon is
Yeah.
more like 5 to 7, if I kind of understand the business right. What's going on here?
So because there's not institutional money in the fund, right? And so frankly, it's some wealthy LPs that pulled money together and they refer to it
Mhm.
as patient capital. So we
Yeah,
behave
right.
like a sophisticated, professionally run, family run company. The family
Hmm.
office is very disengaged. They let the operators operate, which is great. So it's sort of a hybrid culture of a family business with professional management, but a sort
Hmm.
of private equity sort of financial mentality. But we
Hmm.
don't have the same IRR pressures that traditional institutional private equity has, which
Hmm.
is nice, right? And so
Right.
we can continue to perform, and as long as the investors are happy, they want to continue to hold on to the asset.
Well, it looks like you've been doing a pretty good job, Chad, because I saw some numbers like 35% growth and those kinds of things. So if you keep putting those kind of numbers on the board, why wouldn't investors want to hang on to it? It's delivering pretty good returns.
I appreciate that. That was the first year. It's hard to anniversary that every year, but yes.
Right. Right.
Yes, yes.
Well, yeah, but if you put a cumulative annual growth rate together that makes sense, then if there's not a better place to for the money, it makes sense to stick with you for a while. So that's great, and I'm glad you don't have that kind of pressure to do that. So, are how many employees would you have in the business?
Today, across the world, including our two factories that we've opened since I've been with the company, which has been sort of one of our big
Yeah,
pivots we can
yeah,
get into, with temps at our factories, we're close to 400
yeah,
globally.
pretty big
Biggest,
operation.
pretty big. Biggest
Yeah,
office is in Shanghai, about 45 people. We have an sort of an administrative office here in the Bay Area where I work out of.
mhm, yeah.
And then our two factories in the US, one's outside of Las Vegas and one's outside of Atlanta. The Vegas factories opened 4 years ago. Atlanta was 2 years ago. So relatively new for us, but yeah, all in about 400.
Yeah, so what's going on in the bedding industry? I mean, I've seen just remotely not paying a lot of attention to it. Seems like there's a lot of consolidation on the mattress side. Some of the mattress in a box companies are kind of failing or coming out of the
Yeah.
business. A
Yeah.
lot of the bedding, pillows, and bed coverings and things. It seems like there's still a lot of big brands involved in this, where the Ralph Laurens and the Michael
Yeah.
Kors and all those kinds of brands. So it's really a pretty interesting business that's changing quite a bit. How do you see that change, and what do you see your role with that is going to be?
Great observation. So yes, it evolves. It's never a dull moment, but they talk about the pillow business being boring. It really isn't. And there's a lot of product innovation that goes into it, and making the products easy. It's getting it to the right customer at the right time, with the right,
Yeah,
delivery.
yeah,
That's the hard part. But yes, on the mattress side of the business, you're absolutely right, Wayne. There's been a lot of consolidation. The D2C brands that started about a decade ago have a lot of them been consolidated. Sadly, some of them have gone away. Some of them were bought by the larger traditional mattress manufacturers that you're
right.
probably familiar with those names. There's definitely been a consolidation. During the COVID pandemic, as you probably are aware, when people couldn't spend money on travel and services, a lot of people spent money on redoing their homes, right? You're in your house all day long working from
Sure.
home, and you're like, hey, it might be time for a new bed or some new pillows
Yeah,
or new drapes. So we
yeah,
had a huge spike. The industry had a huge spike.
yeah,
The mattress industry and the bedding accessory industry from 20 through 22, record years. In fact, we, Standard Fiber, that year had our banner year in 21. We grew like 35% in revenue just in one year.
right,
Not because we were doing anything extra special. It was just people were spending money on their home. Uh,
right,
and then, the mattress buying cycles, number one, follow the home starts, right? And so housing starts have not been great over the last, several years. And frankly, if you bought a mattress in 2021, 22, you probably don't need a new mattress yet. Again,
right, right.
typical life cycle, 8 to 10 years. And so because of the natural life cycle of mattress buying, they had a huge spike in early 20s. And it's been a slower business. Most mattress brands are
Yeah.
down, over the last several years. And we sort of follow that business on
Hmm.
the what we refer to as the bedding accessory side, right? So sheets, pillows, blankets, all the things that complement your bed.
Yeah.
Some of our biggest challenges today is really consolidation of our customers, right? The retailers. When I started in the business 25 years ago, we had 50 or so home textile retailers that were meaningful that we could
Hmm.
supply to, mostly brick and mortar, some in the omni channel, and when e-com was just getting started. Now
Hmm.
it's kind of like the Magnificent Seven, right? In the S&P 500, there are like seven major retailers in North America that control the supply of these products, right? The Costco, the Sam's Clubs, the TJX family, the department store group. It's really Amazon on the e-com side, and so
Hmm.
they've gotten so much more power as a buyer, right? And there's so few customers, frankly, for us to sell to. So there's an imbalance, candidly, between the suppliers and a power, the leverage that our customers have taken on. To complicate things further or make it even more fun for us is we've got a lot more competition from Asia than we've ever had, right? And so even though we're based here in the US, a lot of our products come from Asia, although we are making more and more here in the US from our two factories. But we continue to feel a lot more pressure from factories out of Asia. What used to be a China dominant industry has now really expanded. We've got competitors from Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, India. In fact, in the pillow business, our two biggest competitors today are Indian-based sheet and towel manufacturers that decided to get into this category of business and have made capital investments here in the US to capitalize on the market. So it's this not great situation where we've got fewer customers to supply to that have a lot more power than they've ever had because there's such a
Hmm.
consolidation of buying power and competitors that are fierce. And so the only way we continue to win is just to do better, right? We have to innovate faster. We have to service our customers better. We have to be cost competitive through our manufacturing economics. That's just table stakes.
Yeah, that was the next question I was going to ask. It sounds like it's a strong lean toward efficiency has to be where you're going, and sometimes those efficiencies are hard to find. A lot of people are finding them with some of the AI capabilities that are
Yeah.
available now. You guys into that space as well, or are you
We
using some
are
there?
slowly but surely. To be candid, it's something I wish we were accelerating and ingraining into our culture faster than we are. We started, on the marketing and creative sales CRM side, doing some sort of 101 stuff
Hmm.
on AI. I am continuing to struggle a little bit through implementation on the manufacturing finance just kind of the integration part of that side of the
Right.
business. And being based here in the Bay Area, I would hope and expect that there'd be a faster sort of adoption and excitement or enthusiasm around AI. But we all know, sort of the current the concerns and
Sure.
that's been an ongoing work for us.
I would expect that one of the areas where you'd have the greatest opportunity would be in the supply chain side of things because you're a global company. You've got probably a much more complex bill of materials than people might think for the
Yeah.
various types of threads and fibers and
Yep.
fillers for all the different products you make. So I expect that, fine tuning those processes first and then getting the automation of those processes with some of the AI tools would be a good place. So,
100%, right? So it's a supply chain game, right? And we were really put to the test. I mean, the industry was last year when the tariffs, came to be, and this what I refer to
mhm.
as the tariff tornado,
Yep.
starting in February of 25 with the Liberation Day tariffs. And so, we, like a lot of people, were overly reliant on China, sort of the factory to the
Mhm.
world. And
Yep.
for obvious reasons, they control, they're a huge country. They've got the infrastructure.
Right.
They've been doing this a long time. They've got the,
Right.
government support, et cetera, et cetera. But
Yep.
we were ahead of it, and we
Good.
continue to put a lot of focus and sort of, mitigating our exposure to, frankly, to any one singular country for obvious reasons. There's such geopolitical risk and
Mhm.
such, macroeconomic factors we can't control, as we witnessed in the last year and a half. And so, yes, supply chain flexibility is key. And I would say that the relationships we've had with some of our longstanding suppliers, I know that's cliche, has really made a difference.
Right.
Some of the newer entrants are trying to sort of get in and build those relationships. And in Asia, the relationships still matter. And they tend to want to work with the Westerners that they know and they trust and pay their bills on time. And
Sure.
and so we've had the luxury of doing this for 25 years.
Mhm.
And as we've migrated and sort of shifted some of that production away, it's really helped us to have those relationships in place. And I think we've been able to move faster than most.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's really an enabler when you have those relationships there. One of the pieces of advice I've been giving, some of my coaching clients is that, it's also really important in a period of uncertainty. And you mentioned some of the uncertainty that's driving a lot of fluctuations these days is to try to buy out farther. whether you're hedging your positions or not, whether you buy out farther and lock in supply chains, even if it turns out to be something that's not as favorable as what you would have had by locking it in
Yeah.
and extending your horizons, you can create some business stability and then also know where you're going to be financially. So
Yeah.
it's one of the techniques that unfortunately is necessary to continually manage our business. And the other thing is 5 year plans seem like an eternity now when things are moving so quickly, right? So you almost got to be doing an annual plan and updating that, every 6 weeks or so. So
Yeah, yeah. Quarterly is kind of our process, and you're right.
smart.
I mean, I laugh when people talk about 5 year plans. It's yeah, 5 month plans maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
When you look back over the last 5 years, I read this recently, and we may have shared previously, is that you look at the beginning of every calendar year for the last 5 years, and the largest single global event that took place during that year, nobody knew on January 1st, right? I mean, starting with the Ukraine war, right? And so,
Exactly.
how do you plan for this stuff? COVID pandemic, right? Shut the world down for years. Happened in March. On January 1st, at least here in the Western Hemisphere, we weren't really talking about it. So you've got to be agile. You just have to be.
Oil prices going up by 60, 70% in, a short period of time. I mean, all kinds of things
Yeah.
can change our world. Well, this program's about stories that key executives like yourself self tell, Chad. So please tell us a story. Set it up for us. Give us the participants. Tell us about something that happened in your past, and let's see what we can find in terms of interesting leadership lessons inside.
Yeah. You know, I'm a big believer in sort of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? And so we
Okay.
learn from our failures. And I think I'm, humble enough and self-aware enough to share some stories that, probably don't maybe that I learned from, right? And
I
so
love
and
that.
others can. Um, One I can start with is when I was recruited into the role that at the company at Standard Fiber today, I came in as a chief commercial officer. We had a CEO in place that had been there for 12 years, and the investors were looking to make a transition. So I was brought in as the number two with sort of a few year time horizon to eventually move up to the CEO seat. About a year into the role, that got vastly accelerated, and sort of I was tapped and said, "You're ready,"
Yeah.
and you're taking the position. And arguable was I ready or
Congratulations.
not? Yeah, it's sort of like, it's your turn, jump on the field.
Right.
Quarterback got injured, and so I will tell you, it was challenging. It was a challenging and disruptive manner in which the former CEO was sort of removed from the organization. He'd been there a long time, had a lot of relationships, a lot of tenured employees. Many of our employees had been there for 20 plus years, continue to be. And
Yeah.
so, sort of jumping into that seat without a lot of, was I ill prepared? No, but it would happen fast, right? And shortly thereafter, being put into this position, our former CEO decided he was going to compete with our company and took
Mm.
a bunch of our great people and with him, and that was really difficult as we were starting to sort of pivot our business, transition a lot of the culture of the organization. And so it was sort of a 1-2 punch of sort of getting thrusted in the seat in a very quick manner. And then quickly finding out that, we now have a new competitor who has a ton of information about our business, relationships,
Sure.
intel, et cetera, and took some really great people with him, which was unfortunate and started a legal battle, as you might imagine. And so that was
Sure.
difficult, as we're trying to keep this train on the tracks moving forward at an even much more
Right.
accelerated pace. And I'm doing, all these other things to sort of operationally keep the business running. That was a really hard thing to sort of deal with and to explain to the organization, why things were going to be okay and, why we're making the changes we're having. And as a brand new CEO. It's my first time as a CEO, which is kind of hard enough.
Yeah.
But doing it in
Yes.
that environment I learned a lot. The battle scars happened fast. And so, taking away from that experience, obviously I've grown a lot. I think it helped me, in terms of understanding the culture of the organizations, understanding how to sort of transform people, really leaning in and listening to people's concerns, which ultimately, people want to know that they're listened to and heard. And I think we've come a long way since then. But it was hard to get thrust in the seat in a very quick way, and then have an immediate competitor that we didn't have before, that was a pretty tough
Yeah.
competitor
A
because he had a
formidable.
lot of, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Let's just, there's a number of different elements here I think it'd be helpful to talk about. First of all, just, you talked about being a first-time CEO. It's interesting. We really don't prepare people very well to be CEOs.
no,
We're recruiting from within. There's a, great experience we have. We have some, some siloed experience, and maybe we have a high level expertise in one or four or five or hopefully 10 different areas by the time we get there. But that call to the type of leadership that's necessary at the top of an organization is unique, isn't it? Tell me about
Yeah.
some of the things you felt. I mean, some people
Yeah.
say it's a lonely place. It is,
Yeah.
because there's no one above you to go to unless you have a board or some investors. And if they're
Yeah.
hands off and, really
Yeah.
expecting you to run the business, you really kind of end up on your own. You're not really well prepared for it. And
Yeah.
trying to keep your head above water, you're really battle hardened as a result of this, which is
Yeah.
great. But what if you
Yeah.
didn't survive? Tell me about how you felt when you
Yeah.
got there, and was there a realization that you're it and you got to make this work?
Yeah, no, there's definitely all that you just suggested. And when people ask sort of like, well, what's it like to be in your first time CEO role? My sort of normal candid responses are, number one is no one ever tells you how much, there's this myth that once you get to the top, you're at the top. The reality is I have a board, I have owners, I have bosses, and
Sure,
and
absolutely.
and especially in the private equity world, even though we're sort of private equity light, you spend a lot of time managing up. And frankly, my investors don't know nearly about much about my business as I do, right? And so one thing that never anyone ever told me was you're not just managing your colleagues and your leadership team and sort of managing sideways and down. There's a lot of upward management and constant communication and fielding a lot of questions that you're kind of like, really? You didn't know that? And so educating your investors on your own business nuances and continuing to keep them updated and apprised on what's going on, the amount of time and energy that goes into that, I was not prepared for. I
Yeah.
really, yeah,
Yeah, and frankly, it's not just keeping them updated. You need to give them the background that's necessary to support the decisions that you're telling them you need to make, right? And the things
correct.
you need to do with the company. There's a lot of complexity there. And
Yeah,
so it's not the kind of work where you're telling them what you're going to do. It's telling them why you're going to do it and why it's
yeah,
important strategically and how it fits the short-term objectives as well. So it's a very, very challenging piece of the role, and it does take up, so depending on the company, it could take a
yeah,
third to half of your time just doing that.
yes,
And then
yes.
you're managing the organization on top. What you mentioned that it was difficult to explain to the organization what's happening. You got a new competitor, it's the former CEO. They know that a
Yeah,
lot of good people have already left. I mean, some of them might have been thinking, should I go too?
yeah,
Some of them were thinking, is this company going to survive?
yeah,
What did you do to strengthen the resolve of the people who were left? I mean, you said it was difficult. You must
yeah,
have done some things to keep them, because you
yeah.
were resilient. You still were able to grow and survive. You're not dead yet.
Not dead yet. If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. Yeah, I
Right.
mean, frankly, a lot of it just comes down to, right, what you learned in kindergarten, right? I listen to people, right? And the empathy matters, right? And yes, the data and the numbers matter, but if you're not people first, the culture, it's always to me, culture and strategy and everything else follows. And so
Yeah.
a lot of it was, painting the picture of the future, right? And sort of what I view to be a primary function for a CEO, right, is to create that vision and consistently communicate it clearly. And so it's like, hey guys, yeah, this stinks, right? And I'm not happy about it either. And
Right.
but we're kind of arm in arm and we're going to get this through together. And here's what I see can happen. Right. And so it's laying out a vision for the future as we're expanding more into retail, as we're opening up these manufacturing facilities, as we're dealing with this tariff tornado. It was a lot. It was a lot. I mean, I call it sort of the wartime leadership. And
Yeah.
so, and can making sure the troops are sort of, I'm in the trenches with you.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hands-on leadership, right? You got to sort of lead from the front and behind and the side all the time and sort of balance that out. And I think, frankly, the team saw that and recognized, the value that staying with the organization and where we were going was the right thing to do. Of course, there were some people who, wasn't a great fit, and that happens, right? And sometimes people need to be released to the industry when it's their
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I'm very proud of the fact that the talent that we were able to retain and the talent we were able to recruit to sort of get us to where we're going.
Good for you. You glossed over a couple of things that were really important, and I just wanted to emphasize them. You're doing it in a very humble way, so I wanted to make sure that we give you a little bit more credit than you were trying to take there, Chad. You said that you have to show them the vision and you have to help them to see it, right? One of the things I would say is critically important, I'm sure you did, is you believed the vision as much as anybody. And
Yeah,
that power of belief and being invested in it and showing them that this is really going to work and that you're all in and
Yeah.
that you expect them to be as well. I know how powerful that can be.
Yeah.
There's going to be some headwinds. There's going to be some signals that
Yeah.
looks like maybe this isn't going to work. But if you're steadfast, it's kind of the old Ted Lasso sign over the door.
Yeah.
If you're saying you're going to believe and you're
Yeah.
going to not, waver in your belief, as a CEO, as a leader, that is so powerful. I
Yeah.
mean, for yourself as well, not just for the people who are watching. I mean, genuinely, you have to continue to believe
Yeah.
until it just doesn't make any more sense.
I
And
agree.
then the second part of it that is so important that you're so right about is the hands-on leadership. I like to say it that you'd never ask anyone to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. And
Yeah.
that creates an energy and a power in the organization when they see the leader come out on the shop floor and do what it takes to get it done and to really be with them. That makes what you said earlier about people being, the most important asset. I mean, everybody says that, but how do you demonstrate that?
Yeah.
You mentioned less listening, empathy, and then
Yeah.
you mentioned, being there with them, believing in the vision, and then demonstrating with hands-on. Those are
Yeah.
tremendous leadership skills that you executed. Maybe you learned them in kindergarten, but I expect you learned them along the
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
and absolutely is powerful.
I appreciate that way. And I would say to your point, though, enthusiasm to me is underrated, right? And energy is really what we have time and energy, right? And our attention. That's kind of what we have, right? And so, and enthusiasm in leadership matters. And you're right. You got to be compelling, and you got to be genuine, right? I mean, it's real easy to sit at the top and be a cheerleader, but if it's not authentic, right, and it's not consistent,
Mhm.
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think that's the it factor, frankly, of strong leadership. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is about leadership. We couldn't have had a better example there. Any other kind of leadership lesson
So
you come
yeah,
out of
the other
this
one
for you?
yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I appreciate. So the one is sort of the manage up, manage down. No one ever told me how much time and energy goes up to, the upside. You
Mhm.
feel, everyone's like
Right.
has. I always thought when you're the CEO, you just get to tell people what to do, right? But it ain't that easy. We all have a boss. And secondly, it's really about. I've said in this role, I've had my best days and worst days of my career, and sometimes that's the same day.
Hmm.
It's a roller coaster of emotions. And I had a coach once who years ago said, one of the most valuable tools I can talk to you about is sort of your self-regulation of your own emotions, right? And so if you can't control your own emotions, right, you're going to have a really difficult time, being a powerful or a competent leader. And it's
Yeah.
so true. And so the highs are high, the lows are low. You take credit for things that frankly you don't deserve credit for. You get yelled at for the things that weren't your fault. Right. And so, and I take those things to heart because I tend to be an overly, that's how I am. I feel those things. And so it's been my own sort of balancing of my own well-being, really holistically, that's been
Hmm.
a real learning experience and managing the ups and the downs and trying to just stay more, more zen, right, throughout the day. And I've done a lot better job in the last year and a half just managing my own health and wellness. I went on a big health journey,
Good.
lost a bunch of weight and exercised a lot and focused a lot
Yeah.
more on nutrition and sleep. And I now do breathing and meditation every morning. And I know that again, a lot of this sounds sort of like hocus pocusy, but I got to tell you, it's been life changing to my work. Because just how I manage my days and my emotions and my own stress level and how I come across to the team. I mean, people notice, right? It's a confidence, it's
You
a
do.
calmness. So,
That's
yeah,
exactly right. I was smiling because you said this. It may sound like hocus pocus. You know what it sounds exactly like? It sounds like my coaching curriculum. It just you're going right down the list of the
yeah,
things that I work on with other CEOs all the time. And so good on you that you got your health and your mental
yeah,
well-being, kind of balanced out. The comment you made about the highs and the lows of emotions. One of the things that happens when people come to me to work on leadership growth, I think they believe we're going to work more on competencies like communication or
yeah,
data-driven decision making or accountability management or organizational structures or strategic planning or, right? There's a whole list of competencies, and
yeah,
we do work on those things to some extent with some people, but so much more work goes on the character side of things.
yeah,
We're talking about how to be more balanced emotionally. Because when you have a leader who's a great leader, not only are you going to be a servant leader, like you just described, by having the vision, really listening to the people, caring about the people, being hands-on, not asking them to do anything you wouldn't do. It's also about having the ability to balance your emotions so that when the excrement hits the air acceleration device, as they say, you got to be the one who's calm. You need to
Yeah,
be the one who's going to make the right decisions and prioritize in real time. If people are going to follow you, they need to admire you, frankly. And it
yeah,
takes a lot to be admired. It's not something you can make up. It's got to be real. It's got to be genuine. And that means you have to be practiced in balancing and managing your emotions. And you don't have time, for example, to get your little feelings hurt about something and get
yeah.
emotional about that and make a bad decision, right? You just don't have
Right.
time for that. You have to completely rise above that. And you talked about the empathy piece. It's so important. I tell stories often about, I remember a time when I had an employee who lost a loved one, and I was with him in the office, and we closed the door and we were having a discussion. And I mean, I was crying with them. I mean, I literally
Yeah,
had that strength of emotion because I really cared about them. And I thought it was important in that moment to show them that the organization cares and tell them what we're going to do. And
yeah,
then I had to get up from that meeting. I walked out, my eyes were red. I'm sure my secretary said to me, she says, you got a 40-year celebration down the hall there, because so and so is having this 40th year. And so literally walking down the hall, I had to turn my emotions over and I had to get into the next moment and tell clever, funny stories and
yeah,
have a good
yeah,
time with the
yeah,
team.
yeah,
And it's exactly the picture of what you described.
yeah.
It it can happen like this on a day-to-day basis.
You have to be good at compartmentalizing. That's probably an undervalued virtue, frankly. Yeah, going from the crying episode to being
Yeah,
the,
yeah,
telling the jokes, and
yeah.
again, not a strength of mine naturally 10 years ago. It's really it's a muscle you got to develop.
Mhm.
And compartmentalizing is valuable, right? Especially when you're managing all those things.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Um,
just to wrap this up, I don't want to miss the fact that maybe as organizations, for the people who are listening to this and the people who are going to become CEOs someday with no more training than you or I had to do it.
mm,
Yeah, you've been around the block a few times. Yes, you've had some ups and some downs, some hard lessons and some big wins. But it is a very different thing when you challenge yourself to be the kind of leader you need to be good at being a servant leader, at being someone who is going to inspire a team to go to the next level. And
yeah.
so good on you that you were able to do that because so many people really fail when they get thrown into the deep end of the pool. So really proud of you, Chad, and I'm glad that you shared that story because it kind of shows some weakness in how difficult it was. And
Yeah.
I admire leaders who are willing to do that, especially for the
It
benefit
does.
of others.
And you're right. And the word I would say is vulnerability, right? And I think a
Yeah,
lot of times with leaders, we want to pretend like we're superheroes. And the reality is your team wants to see vulnerability, right? I have cried in
absolutely.
front of my team, right? And and
Yeah,
and I think they respect it, right?
yeah,
In an appropriate way. And
yeah.
it's interesting, I've worked with a variety of executive coaches over the years, and the one I just most recently worked with, I went through like a 10 session thing, and it was really all about bringing love into the workplace. And I was like, I would never have used the word love, right, in the workplace. And as we go through this journey together, with this gentleman I was working with, it was transformative for me, really, just on how I think about work and how I think about people, how I take care of
Right.
myself. And so it is. I know it sounds soft and mushy, but you can be a
No,
hard driving, results driven leader and still love your people, right? They're not mutually
absolutely.
exclusive.
Absolutely. And, as a matter of fact, I was in a coaching session just this morning, and we were talking about the power of love, that love's the most powerful force in the universe. I'm a Christian, so I have that faith to fall back on. I mean, Jesus tells us to love everyone as ourselves. That's a pretty big demand. And if
Yep.
you're in a position of authority, how much more important is that? But love can be strong as well. Think about your children. I mean, your children might desperately want that, new, iPhone at the age of 12, and all their friends might have it, but you have to stand your ground because you know
Yeah.
it's not healthy for them. And if you love them, you're not going to give in to them.
That's
You're
right.
going to stand up and do what's right for them. Because
Yeah.
I forget the coach or the philosopher who said it this way, but they said, if you are not honest with other people when you're trying to help them, you're
Yeah.
not helping them. You're not loving them.
Yeah.
You're protecting and loving yourself. So when you're avoiding conflict. So sometimes you have to have conflict, and love is a good driver of that.
Yeah,
So
I tell my teenagers, I'm telling you no because I love you. I mean, and
yeah,
sometimes that's,
exactly. They don't buy it, by the way, but
yeah, they don't always buy it. They might 5 years later, but yeah,
yeah,
believe
they will
believe me,
eventually. I'm
real
not sure
another
5 years is enough time, Chad, but my experience is it takes the late 20s, so we'll see.
yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
be ready to stand for a while, stand on that.
Appreciate it.
So listen, as we wrap up this conversation, it's been fantastic. I really appreciate it. I like to ask a couple of questions, my desk. The first one is, if you rewind 20 years, think about your younger self before you had all this experience and all of this background to lean on. What one piece of advice would you give your younger self?
I would say, laugh more often. Don't take yourself so seriously, because there's enough serious bad things going on. And frankly, I think, it's okay to feel joy and it's okay to celebrate wins. And by the way, you can have a really tough stuff going on, but being grateful and appreciative for all the wonderful things that are going on and keeping
Mm,
that balance is just so crucial from a mental well-being perspective. And we're really,
it's,
at the end of the day, that's all we have is our own mind, right? And as leaders, I think we've got to be very protective of our physical and mental well-being. And so
yeah,
I would
100%.
Oh, I underestimate, to me, of course, like every 22-year-old, feels like all I got to do is work 100 hours a week and make all these great connections. And the reality is balance is key. And all of us only have the same 7 days and 24 hours, right? Nobody's creating more
Right.
time, right? And so it's a marathon, not a sprint. And finding that balance, laughing a little bit more, taking yourself a little bit less seriously, I think is incredibly important. And recognizing the most important thing, like you said, is love and relationships, right? And so, I've lost jobs, I've been fired from jobs, and I've recovered, right? And and you learn from a lot of those failures. You don't learn from your successes. And so that's life. And so I think I
Yeah,
would have
it
told
is for
myself,
sure.
yeah, take yourself less seriously, enjoy the ride.
Yeah, very good advice. I think every day is an opportunity to live your life, not just the ones that are somewhere out in the future when you get where you think you want to be. Let's
Yeah,
fast forward the other direction. Let's say you and I are having what would we have? We're looking out over the Pacific from where you live there in Northern California. Maybe
yeah.
we'd be having a glass of wine as the sun sets, or something. What are you going to tell me you're most proud of 20 years from now?
I'd say I would probably be most proud of the fact that I raised incredible children, first and foremost, and had a wonderful, loving marriage, because I think that matters. The most important decision I ever made in my life was my wife. And I am so proud of the family that we have. And yes, I feel like I'm an accomplished CEO, and the executive benefits, the economics, et cetera, have been wonderful. What does that matter, right? If you don't have the family and the love in your health, right? And so I would say I'm so proud of the fact that I was able to find the balance and find the love of my life and raise two incredible, inspiring children that have gone on to do incredible things that I frankly take some credit for, creating the environment and to be able to do that. So from a sort of personal side, I think I would lead with that. And then secondarily, I think again, what I'm really proud of, especially as I look past the last 5 years, and I'm sure over the next 20 years of my career, is really the ability to take a team, align them, right? Create a strategy, create a vision, get on that sort of this mission-driven plan, and then, be a leader of leaders, right? And what I think often happens are, leaders tend to want people that just say yes, right? And or they want the people that, bow to them, et cetera. That's not my style. And I think, frankly, the amount of leaders that I have promoted, created, frankly, people that have even left, right, working for me and have gone on in their careers and have become even more senior in their development, that
Right.
gives me a ton of pride, right? And sort of creating leadership and giving people the forum for growth. And the confidence and the opportunities, to me, that's just immeasurable, right? And so, impacting these individuals that I've touched for them to move on, go on and be stronger leaders themselves, that to me has tremendous value.
Absolutely, no question. And I think it solves the problem that you had being thrown into a CEO role without the
Yeah,
proper kind of leadership development. You're solving that. I know I have a few people who, worked in my organization back when I was in the corporate world, and now I see them as, head vice presidents of operations, CEOs of businesses, and leading things. And so, like you, I take great pride in that.
yeah,
I think, like you're proud of your children, you'll be proud at the end of it all of the relationships you have. With the people I coach, I like to say that we have one prime directive that we start everything with. And that's when I get up in the morning, I want to touch someone else in a positive way. And
Mhm.
if you set that as your prime directive to start a day, it's hard to fail unless you really screw up. Because we all want to kind of have positive relationships, that optimistic energy you mentioned earlier. And I think it can take us a long way. So thanks for sharing the thoughts that you shared today, Chad. If people wanted to get in touch with you, learn more about
Yeah.
your business or about you, how would they do that?
Yeah, best way is probably on LinkedIn. Chad Altbaier, last name's Altbaier. My personal email address I'm happy to give out is chadaltbaier@yahoo.com. That's all one word, and would be delighted to connect.
Well, that's fantastic. Thanks for that. And I'm sure you'll have some follow-ups. I know I'd like to stay in touch with you. I hope we can do that. And
Absolutely.
I really appreciate you being on the program. Maybe we'll even have you back sometime because you have good stories, my man.
I appreciate the opportunity, Wayne. Great to
Yeah,
talk.
that's been great. All the best and God bless.
Likewise.
Well, that's it for Driven to Lead today. We really appreciate you being with us. Share this with a friend or a business colleague if you would. And if I could remind you again, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. We're very grateful for that. So until next time, always remember the high road leads to a better place.